Hey folks, Rich Heilman here, and today we have a special session, and we're going to talk about the new ABAP Development Tools VS Code extension. And today I have with me my good friend Thomas Ritter, known each other for almost 20 years now, I guess. Um, he was the first one to pull me in and have me mess around with ADT and Eclipse back in the day. I think that was the 2006, 2007 timeframe, or something like that. But
Later.
yeah, good to have you back. And we're also joined by Christopher Hermann and Sebastian Ratz, also part of the development and product management teams here at SAP, working on the VS Code extension as well. So, gentlemen, do you want to take turns introducing yourself and talking a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. Can go first. So yeah, my name is Thomas Ritter. I'm part of the product management organization, and I'm basically still doing the project lead for the project. Been driving this now since quite some time. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. And
Yeah.
obviously we are all from the ABAP Development Tools team side. Yeah. So go over to you, Sebastian.
Yeah, I'm Sebastian Ratz. I'm been a developer at a company for 10 years now, and yeah, technical lead on this project and responsible for the core architecture in getting all the components working together.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Christopher Hermann, and I've been with the ABAP Development Tools now for almost 9 years. And yeah, over the time I had the chance to work on topics like the ABAP file format, moving our editor integrations from Eclipse Java coding to the ABAP side. And now, of course, over the last months, working on VS Code integration.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and there's a lot of excitement going on around the community right now with the release of the ABAP Development Tools extension for VS Code. Um, the community has obviously you know been wanting this for quite some time, support for VS Code. And, you know, yeah, it's taken us, a few years to get there. But really, what I think the power that comes along with this, now being in VS Code, is also being able to take advantage of the agentic coding of the world that's happening now. And from what I've seen as of last week, I can tell the community, I think this is looking pretty good, pretty promising, as far as an initial release. And I think by the end of the year or so, I think we'll have a really, really, really strong story. So, that being said, I'd like to turn it over to you guys to talk a little bit about what has shipped, what was in scope, and what we can look forward to going forward. Sound good?
Yeah,
All
for
right.
sure.
Over to you guys.
Maybe maybe let me start on the product side, and then maybe also on the technical architecture. Maybe Sebastian, you can tell a little bit also about the architecture. Yeah, so what I shipped is obviously first version of that of the extension. Announced that on TechEd last year. For us, it's we see it a little bit like a as an if you follow from the gaming world, like on Steam, they always call it early access version. So we really wanted to go out as early as possible, also to involve the community because we know they're really passionate about it. Also see where we should take it together with the community because we are so late. It took us a long time to get there, and that was mainly due to that we. So what I think is super important to understand, and a lot of people are surprised is that the teams who are working on this, they are also still the teams who work on SE16 and doing support tickets for the screen painter. So it's basically for us like we have to now support a third IDE. So we have this GUI tools, and really like GUI tools like SE16, and then we have obviously Eclipse, and then we have VS Code. So for us, it was not figuring out like the community, how get we this in, how do we build the extension, but it was really how do we build this that we can scale the team to support basically all three IDEs. Obviously, SAP GUI is in legacy mode, but then also, we clearly made the statement that we also still want to continue Eclipse because we know people, like a lot of people, they've also wrote us, like I know some people will not believe this, but they still write in the surveys that they love Eclipse and they don't want to actually move to VS Code. So we want to make those people happy too. So that's why we and then basically we had a couple of breakthroughs. I think we can talk about this later, but we realized, okay, we can definitely reuse our Eclipse code base. I think that story has been told a lot. And once we had that breakthrough, we knew, okay, we can actually build this. We can achieve it with the people we have. And then in terms of what we shipped, we said, okay, we definitely want to ship early, like I said, and then say, like, what do we ship really first? What makes the most sense? And again, we have been doing these surveys since the last 2-3 years, and everybody was like, hey, I want to have finally UI development in one tool again, right? We had UI development. You remember this one, the reports. Rich, you were always the best ones in the ABAP program. We got reports. We had that one. Then we had obviously BSP, where actually Rich and we met in the forum a lot. Then we had WebDoing Pro ABAP, everything always in one IDE. And then once we went to RAP and Fiori, that broke that story.
Yep.
And we do not have end-to-end stack development in one IDE anymore. And so that was like a natural fit. It was like, hey, cool, this is what we can do in the limited time, because basically the first version, we always said that, it's basically in the end, what came down to 11 months of development time, like net development time. So we knew, okay, that is something we could build in that time frame, which would still make a lot of people happy. Yeah, and that's why also you don't see other things right now in terms of object types. We will talk about more like which object types come next, but that's basically the story. And then, but that is basically the end product, like what you can use. But the underlying technology, what we built, was also a lot what we had to build, and that I think can hand over to Sebastian, maybe from a file system side, also to Christopher.
Yeah, so maybe I can talk a little bit about the architecture in general. So you might be familiar with the Java tooling in VS Code. And the interesting part is that when you run that, you're also running an Eclipse underneath, because essentially what the Red Hat and Microsoft guys are doing there is they're repackaging the JDT tooling from Eclipse and using that to provide all the language features in the editor. And this is basically the same approach we took by saying, well, okay, we already have built all the functionality for Eclipse once, so how can we make the most of our code base without having to reinvent the wheel? And that's the architecture we basically chose, which means we're using the language server protocol as a standard to offer pretty much all the capabilities that the standard editor needs, like syntax coloring, navigation to objects, searching, and all that stuff, which you basically get with little implementation needed. And then, of course, ABAP is special, so we had to build a lot of custom APIs next to the default APIs in order to enable all the specific stuff that ABAP is known for. So, for example, the debugger is completely different than any other debugger in any other language, because you really have other lifecycle managements to deal with there. And that's just one example. So this was really the big problem we had to solve, and also the big benefit that we had, because we had a much code base to reuse. And this is also when we took the decision that we want to basically support every ABAP system that you can connect to via Eclipse, to also enable those systems for VS Code, because we are reusing all the Java APIs that we already built for Eclipse. And then, of course, this was not all that we need to do. By making this stack work, we had to do a lot of cleanups. So the Eclipse IDE in itself is quite large. So one thing we definitely wanted to do from the start is to provide the extension as small as possible. So one thing we wanted to do is also to improve the user experience when installing Eclipse installation. ADT tools is rather cumbersome, but here we really strive for a one-click solution in essence. And that's why we bundled everything. So all the components needed, the JDK is in there, and basically the Java tools from Eclipse side. And on top of that, we then had the ability with a little thin layer of TypeScript to enable the VS Code extension. And maybe then Thomas?
Maybe you can also say one sentence to the JVM, which I also always found interesting, because I mean the download is only 86 megabytes. Like,
yes,
why is it so small? So maybe you can.
Of course, sure. So what we did there is to use the standard practice of only shipping the parts of the JVM we actually need. So we don't do like heavy Java stuff that we would need to have a full-blown JRE in there, but we only took the base modules and a few others and then used JLink to build as small as possible runtime that we then could easily bundle into our extension. Yeah, and the JVM and the other half of the language server, I think it sums up to about 80 or 90 megabytes per platform. It could probably be improved again, but I think it's a good start.
There has already been a comment in the community about comparison between Eclipse and VS Code, and the comment was around Eclipse being a little bit slow in some cases. Doing what you just describing, that kind of solves that problem in the VS Code world, right? It's a little bit more faster since it's not as heavy in Eclipse. Is that correct?
Yeah, partly. I mean, the footprint is definitely smaller,
Yeah.
for sure. So we are not loading any Eclipse UI parts. That's all VS Code. And so simply from the architecture of how the user interaction work, so everything is asynchronously. So simply by applying these modern techniques, it feels much more snappy, for sure. The startup performance, it's still something we're struggling with, because the typical issue there is really also the antivirus solutions running on machines, which has a huge impact on that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
so be aware of the Microsoft Defender. Also, if you look at IntelliJ or these kind of platforms, they all basically tell you like, hey, Microsoft Defender can extremely slow down your IDE. I mean, that came to a point, we got like one internal feedback for Eclipse where somebody basically told us like, hey, Thomas, I can't launch this in the meeting because it takes 3 minutes to open. If you have that kind of problem, something's wrong with your machine, okay? So my ADT on my Mac with the virus scanner not being aggressively, in the background starts like 20 seconds max. So if you, and it's definitely also, feel free to look into like Microsoft Defender configuration also for your company. Companies can do something there and basically even also Android Studio, if you go to those documentations, they all give you basically like one page on how to configure Microsoft Defender, that it doesn't kill your performance. So, and that will also kill the performance of the language server. Once the language server is starting, if it takes a long time, it could be Microsoft Defender. So definitely double check that. Yeah. And then maybe, Sebastian, you can also talk a little bit about the UI rendering, because that was always, like a pain in Eclipse, which is now better.
Yeah, so the technology stack that Eclipse is built on, like SWT, I think that's what you're pointing at, Thomas. Yeah. It was a design decision. Like SWT, standard widget toolkit. So it's basically the UI widget library of Eclipse, which had the goal back then to make all the UIs look like native operating system UIs. So on Mac, it would look like a Mac application. On Windows, it would look like a Win32 application, and on Linux, like GTK. And that was a valid approach back then, but I think what we are seeing these days is also standardization. So the apps become basically browsers, and the UI rendering is defined by the application and not by the operating system anymore. And so this is also the reason why Eclipse is often considered to be not as modern anymore. And yeah, of course, then also the maintenance of all these three basically widget library implementations for 3 operating systems is a big point to keep in mind. And yeah, we don't have this problem anymore with VS Code because we are not using any of the old UI technologies at that point.
And the web-based render is just way faster, which that's so optimized, right? Because everything is like so many UIs running on the web. And for example, also we had like comments like, hey, the debugger is much slower, the stepping in Eclipse. And a lot of that came down. Like then we started optimizing it. And then in the end, really realized that it's not even the backend calls. It's really the UI renderer, which basically slows down the stepping. That's why also sub GUI renders faster. And that is also, for example, something you will see now. You would say like, well, they did so much great work there. No, it's just the renderer is faster. It's actually, so we will be honest.
And one thing, but simply also amazing feature, I think we used it also ourselves right now, is like you can just zoom in and everything scales. So it's really good.
For demos, yeah. And maybe we can round this off now with the files, so there also Christopher can jump in. So obviously, it's called VS Code, right? So I always joke it's not VS Forms. So we're going for file-based first. obviously now also with AI, it makes total sense because you want the diff stuff and their files are kings. But yeah, so maybe you can touch a little bit on the file system.
Yeah,
First of
sure.
all, why this file system, and then also maybe on the file, like what kind of files are we seeing, right? And also how maybe the community is actually coming in here because obviously we didn't do this alone, you know.
Yes, as you said, so VS Code, we rely on files. Yeah, we have only the files in the Explorer that we can see, and basically what we are reusing is the ABAP file format. So luckily, we started a project 5 years ago, I think, with the community together to specify file formats for every object type that is out there. And so, for example, if we compare to Java, yeah, there do we have classes, interfaces, a few more object types, but in ABAP, I think there are several hundreds of object types. And yeah, now we have really an official documentation and specification for every object type that is there. And yeah, since we already have now this specification, yeah, we decided that we want to reuse this ABAP file format also in the VS Code extension. And yeah, that's basically what you see, what you get if you install the extension. And so mainly it's based on JSON files and of course the ABAP source code files. And yeah, so furthermore, we decided to not bring in any form UIs. So if you a user of Eclipse, yeah, of course, you know, there are a lot of form UIs, a lot of buttons, a lot of text that you can enter. But in VS Code, you will just get the files. And yeah, that's basically it, at least for the current state.
And
And I
maybe
think I think the hardcore developers that are using VS Code would prefer that over form-based editors anyway, right? I would think so.
yeah, yeah. Two comments regarding that. So first of all, it's just an initial design decision. So if
Yeah.
people are really on the fence that they want to have the form-based UIs, since we can enable these in the future for sure. So we're waiting also there for feedback for sure. So please provide feedback. And then the second thing is that was actually kind of interesting. In a lot of talks I gave, people asked like, "Hey, can we have the same thing in Eclipse?" And yeah, and it's already there. So if if you have certain object types, especially the new ones, the ones which we call this the framework server-driven UI, you can always right-click and then in Eclipse in the right-click menu say open in source code editor. Or Christopher, maybe you can or source editor, right? Or source view or something along those lines. Yeah, but it's already there, and people were like, "Oh, wow, it's already there." So also, if you now want to unify your editing experience, it's like, "Oh, well, I actually like this in VS Code. I also want to have this in Eclipse because I mean, there's still some back and forth switching needed for sure. Once until we have the feature parity reached. For that one, you can actually also customize basically the experience in Eclipse that it then has the same as in VS Code.
Yeah, and so what's really nice on the file formats as well is, so back then when we started 5 years ago, of course, the AI was not that enhanced that it is now. But so what we really see is if you gave the AI agents the specification, the JSON schema that we have, we get really, really good results based on the files. And of course, if we just would have form editors, it will be much harder to integrate AI agents and so on.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of going back with AI. The best thing AI knows how to talk to is a CLI, and you know, so it's kind of coming back around. You know, we started with CLI and we threw GUIs on top, and now we're going back to CLI because that's what AI likes to talk to. So yeah,
I think in
for
general,
sure.
the file thing has become really the core again.
yeah.
So maybe Christopher can also say a few words about how we made the choice to make the tree look like, how we took the decision there. So it's completely different than in Eclipse, but yeah, I think a bit more like SE80 again.
Yeah. So I mean, we know there's also the feedback from the community that the current implementation of the file system is not working properly with all the AI agents. So currently we support Copilot, but with Cloud Code, for example, and local file editing, you will have basically no, at least not with the official extension, you will have no chance to use the files. And the reason is that in the other world, all the objects and the source code and so on is somewhere stored on the server side on a database. And there is basically in the other world, there is no file. So what we are doing in the VS Code extension is we implement a virtual file system, and that creates the file based on the database tables. And the idea was really to implement this virtual file system in a way that it would work as a local file system. So we really have URIs, they are unique, so we don't have files that exist twice in the Explorer and so on. And with the ABAP file format, of course, in the file name, we really have a unique identifier that we can map back to the database tables on the backend. And yeah, with that, so as I said, currently with Copilot, since it's really good integrated into VS Code, we already have the chance to integrate the AI agent here on this side via the file system. But of course, for other agents or other AI tools, we need to figure out how to enhance the file system so that it is also supported and not only in VS Code.
Now we're basically with the MCP tool. So there was also some feedback today, also all the time in the community, and it's pretty clear that we shipped the first version of the MCP server, but that is really based on that you use VS Code. That's how we started, because also when we started the CLI stuff, I saw some people, were already using open code, not cloud code, but it was not hitting the ABAP developer community so much. And now we see that actually people really like this, and so obviously now we also want to react to that one. So I can also announce that obviously the main tools which people ask for, they are either under development. For example, search is already under development, and then read and write we are also looking into. We can support this, but I still want to mention that if you want to have the best user experience in terms of probably IDE, like really like a full integration, and I think Christopher, you use more Cloud Code more in VS Code than I do, but if you want to have like really nice integration, Copilot is really probably still the best, because it does all that inline rendering. I think Cloud Code is also giving you like a diff viewer, right? Like it's not inline rendering, so it gives you really probably the nicest user experience. If you like that, right? User experience is always so it really is always based on your preferences. I will not say it's the best. But personally, if you really want to have like something fully integrated, it is because they obviously own the stack or own the stack. Now they open sourced it, but they did a really nice job there. So that's why also, and they already have read and write tools for the virtual file system. So that's why if you want to have read and write tools, then the Copilot is basically currently the best option. And what's kind of interesting, that's why I also wanted to touch on this, is I'm not sure if you have heard this, Rich, but they actually on the 28th of May, the VS Code team released the newest version. And that one really allows you now to bring your own key to Copilot, and you do not need a Copilot account anymore. Because a lot of people were like, well, I already have maybe Cloud Code and I have an API key for Anthropic's models, right? Or for OpenAI or whatever. And you can now basically go into the VS Code and just configure the models, and then with Copilot, and then you can just use the Copilot UI with your API keys. And because previously people were also like, well, I already have a license with Anthropic, so I don't want to have another license with Microsoft, right? And this is not needed anymore, or which is really now opening it up. And now really Copilot is very similar, like Klein and these other solutions, so you can basically bring your own key and just use them.
Great.
So if you're really frustrated, for example, right now with the Cloud Code support in VS Code, and you just want to have maybe wait until we have the read write tools available, you can actually take your key, use Copilot without a Microsoft account, and just do that in between, until we ship the other tools in. So I also want to, before we even go in there, I also want to take one step back and also acknowledge that a lot of that work was already done by the community, right? So people look at it as like, wait a sec, there is already the ABAP file system, and it does way more, And so yeah, for sure we are following in their footsteps, and we also aware of this. I also had a long chat with Lars Harm, other folks, Marcelo at TechEd last year. So we even gave them a sneak preview so that they could see it basically first after some late in the evening. That was pretty cool.
Right.
And also ask them for feedback, for example, also for the destination JSON, all the stuff we did there. Like we asked them, hey, is this the right direction? And so for us, it's really important that we are coming into something established. Same also now with the MCP, where also I think we really have to see how we collaborate better with the community, because basically they're really ahead of us right now. And also have to see how can we also collaborate better in terms of what does the community expect us to do, what are the expectations right from the official core tools, and what do we expect from them, in terms of what can they build on top, and which we probably will never do, right? So that we also have some alignment there, and I think that's really important for the overall ABAP community. So right now we see, for example, with MCP, we definitely, and that's also what people told me, people like Marian Zeiss, hey, you should really own like these core tools, right? Like activation, running ABAP unit, not everybody needs, again, another web server who runs ABAP unit, and these more like low level things. That's the feedback I got. So feel free also, to everybody here to give me more feedback. So that's that. And then, so that's basically on the MCP side. And then tooling wise, obviously we have to deliver more object types. That's very obvious. We have, I think, 12 plus object types right now. It's purely RAP focused. And but I can tell you that already in the next release, like really important ones, and that was also shared in the blog post, are coming. So DDIC tables obviously is missing. Structures are missing. The classic source-based stuff like programs includes function modules is missing. So all of that is coming in the next version, and we also still have to figure out the schedule of these releases. But
that was my next question.
yeah. But and then I will not. So Sebastian is smiling because we also have to see. But we definitely will try to be faster, because we, with the clips, we always have to be try to keep it compatible with the backend release, right?
Right.
Because it's basically the backend is ahead, and then we have to make sure we also deliver the client. In this case, VS Code is behind; it's basically catching up.
Right.
So we will try to push to release more often. But also, for example, our build and delivery team was like, "Hey, we just want to ship something once because we have never shipped this, so then we can figure out this." So please, everybody, be a little bit patient. Give us some time to figure everything out. First, so obviously we had also some internal testing around within SAP, so we know some stuff, like version history, transport organizer, whatever. Those are obvious things which we are currently already working on. So first versions have been already in internal builds, but yeah, definitely also data preview, SQL console, these kind of things. Obviously are high on the list, but if there's more stuff, for us, this is really, from us for the community, this project they have requested for so long. So we really want to make them happy. And also, so maybe one more remark to that one, regarding that one. So it's very similar what we did in with Eclipse, where we had the SAP GUI integration. So whenever you stuck, the SAP GUI would pop up. Right. Here we're doing it a little bit differently, but whenever you are stuck, you have an object type, it's not supported, you can actually run a command and it will open Eclipse with that object type. So maybe you have not used that one yet, but yeah, you just for example, you end up at a table right now, like, damn, now I need to edit the table. Yeah. You just pop the command, I think open in ADT for Eclipse, and then it will just open it, you edit, you go back. Exactly what you said, but obviously, and I mean, we like to be honest. Obviously, that doesn't help you. Your AI, right? The AI can't jump. So
right.
Then basically, right. you are then suddenly you have to copy and paste stuff, which is not nice. That's why we really have to get these really important stuff, like tables in as fast as possible, to enable those flows.
Yeah.
Christopher, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. So maybe one addition. So what's the actual issue by integrating so much different object types? So I touched it earlier. In Java, you have basically one language. So you have to provide, for example, syntax highlighting for Java language. But on our side, we have to provide the syntax highlighting for the ABAP language, for CDS views, for tables. And so there are a lot of different object types with a different syntax, a different grammar and so on. And I think that's really the part that takes so much time for us.
Yep.
And it's also the semantics on top of that those types. Sure, those server-driven types, as we call them, they are basically a JSON file, but many of these JSON elements have then very specific meaning in the ABAP world, and you want to get all the information from the system in there, code completion, value helps, so these things should all be done automatically when implemented correctly on the ABAP side. Yeah, and that's the challenge, to enable all those object types with a proper UI and convenience.
Yep.
Maybe one more small remark. Christopher probably can second that. So what's actually also kind of cool now, which probably some people don't see, is because we are now file-based and file only, we really have to drive now the ABAP file format really hard. And actually also ABAP Git will immensely profit from that one, because ABAP Git also Lars is really also pushing us like, hey, you have to do more official, formats, which is really cool. And really shout out to Lars, who's doing a great job there. And keep pushing us. But that's actually so he could see like there's a lot of stuff coming in, for example, now data elements domains. I think so we had some stuff before, right, Christopher? I think some proposals even from the community.
The community did a really great job there.
Yeah, so it's now really so that project actually has side effects on other projects as well, like really, because the files are the foundation for everything. Maybe you can again explain a little bit what the language server is, Sebastian, and what you are now delivering.
Yeah, so basically when you now download the extension, it's a VSX file for VS Code, but inside of that bundle there is a Java component, so it's like a miniature Eclipse and a runtime, and that of course serves as the API for all our use cases in VS Code. And yeah, what we could think about is having this component reusable in some sense, and that would enable many more scenarios that you can build on top of it. But we're not there yet. That involves a lot of API consistency. So right now we have the luxury that we can basically change and break things because there's no official API in there yet. It's just ourselves that consumes it. And in the future, that could be a viable option.
And what does that enable for the end developer?
I mean, basically what one aspect, let's say, for example, you want to do a log on to a system. So what we see right now with all the AI tools, it's basically log on hell. So every time you need to connect to some MCP or some external system, you're going through all this token exchange, and doing that securely and in a standardized way, you probably don't want to rebuild everything that we have already implemented for Eclipse and what we are now reusing for the VS Code extension. So having one proper dedicated logon mechanism that you can just rely on is one example. Or let's say you want to connect to an older release and also to a cloud release. Getting all that compatibility handling right so that you can work with the original first version of the class editor as well as the cloud API version of the public cloud system, that's completely different. And this is all done transparently by the language server, which does all the heavy lifting of calling the REST services underneath and exposing it in a standardized way, where you in the end just have to edit a file and save it, and the rest is done.
Nice.
What's also, so, and obviously this is bundled already, okay? So it's not like Mario and Zeiss already basically published the first project, which is, just looking at basically reusing the language server. And that's also actually probably what we would recommend if you want to play around with it, just access it via the VS Code extension. So basically what happens is if you download the VS Code extension, obviously it gets saved on your disk. It contains the executable of the language server, which we then start, but you can also start it from the outside. We do not have any documentation on this yet. This is actually also in the backlog that we at least have some documentation how you can start this also as a standalone server, and that's probably also the first move we will do. Is not even offer you that as a standalone download, but actually you can get it with the extension, and then we at least tell you how you can basically run the executable via the terminal, start stuff. And then it gives you really some interesting APIs right out of the box, because we obviously have to support the language server. So for example, one thing which is, I think, really interesting, some people commented on that, at least internally, is that you, for example, can get the symbols, so like an outline for source code. And that is actually super helpful for, I think, I'm not sure, so I didn't fully look into this, but I think the Vibing Steampunk folks, they do this via the linter from Lars Harm. Could be wrong, but that would be also another option. So basically you have now access to basically some sort of like a parser right out of the box. Yeah, it's the go-to symbols, right, Christopher? I think like this. Yeah. And also navigation and everything. So there's a lot of stuff in there, which then also LLMs can use. So we also are looking into the language server, how we can actually enable this a little bit more, that LLMs can use it directly. And the reason why this is interesting, which is, and then I think the Vibing Steampunk showed this to us as well, showed the community, it's really important to be token efficient. So you definitely don't want the LLM to read, I don't know, I looked at the ABAP Git report. I think there's like this ABAP Git report, which has everything, right? This install report, I think it's like 100,000 lines of code or whatever. So it's way more, actually. And it's actually kind of cool. We opened this in VS Code and it ran smoothly. So it was like a good test for the rendering and the syntax highlighting. But anyway, it's probably maybe the biggest report ever written. I don't know. Don't quote me on that one. But if you give that to an LLM, right, you don't want to that it reads. It will probably also read it in chunks, right, and analyze it. But if you would give it the whole thing, it's just like not very efficient. And this way, basically, so what if Claude gets access or any kind of agent to this kind of language server, they know the language servers. They can basically say like, well, pass me the 100,000 lines, right, and give me the outline first, which is obviously compressed, and then it can use the outline also for navigation. Okay, the user asked me about, maybe the get user detail method. Okay, cool. Basically it goes first to the language server, let it pass the source code, get then the position of the method, and then basically can tell, okay, now I just grab or just pick this snippet, because I think the symbol also gives you the beginning and the end of the element, basically. And that all runs then on client side, obviously. Yeah, and I think that's something which people always were also asking, like, get some sort of access to the parser. And that's now like I said, it's not officially, okay, so it's not an official API, but basically, if you know how to start the language server and you can poke around a little bit and look at what Marian is doing, he's already doing it. And those are obviously then the official language server APIs. So this just stuff we implemented, so they are 100% stable.
Yeah,
you can definitely start building stuff on top of it. And especially, Sebastian, if they use the language server APIs, we have nothing against it, because it's just it's a stable interface. And then obviously from our side, we had to at some point open up and share more of the details on our APIs. Which are then custom language server APIs, and that will come at a later point in time. And for stuff like activation and maybe running the syntax check. But even the syntax check is actually also language server specific. Like there's these, it's called like diagnostics, and that gives you all the syntax errors, and you can use this already. Also, the LLM can use this already. Yeah. So we are really looking forward to see what people will do with the language server. And like I said, so there's nothing officially documented yet, but people will figure it out. And
they'll figure it out.
you have interesting AI agents, like your AI agent will figure it out for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But if you, yeah. So we've seen some interesting stuff there. Yeah. Like also a little bit of the feedback which we received so far. From the community, also in the comments, good feedback. So first of all, thanks for that. So one thing was, and we knew this because we also got the same feedback internally, is that we only ship with SSO for RFC. Right. So maybe Sebastian, you want to go into this one? Like, why did we prioritize this? Like, why does this come last? And why couldn't we ship
I'd say it comes second. So it just didn't make the first release, essentially. And this is purely due to delivery standards like security, getting this done right. Because in the end, what's happening, the user enters a password and this goes through the stack and has to be sent to the server in the end. And we had to get that done in a solid way. And this just didn't make it to the first release. But we had this working already for months internally, just not rolled out yet. But now everything is signed off. And this will be the major feature of the upcoming version, I guess.
Yeah.
Which we don't know
And
when
we
that's
could have
released yet.
Sorry, Thomas?
as soon as possible, but
Soon as possible.
I can't.
Okay.
We really want it. So internally, but it's internally we already have a release branch basically. So development of that version is already done. But now we have to see when we ship it. Also, like in terms of what's the next release. Like I said, so we haven't even set up our rhythm yet.
Right.
We're so busy, just getting this out as soon as possible. Which for some people will still be like, well, you're really late. Like, yeah, but we still try to be as soon,
Right.
be as fast as possible. Yeah, and it's like the full package, right? It's not just like logging in, but you also
Right.
have the situation where your password is expired.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to via UI to provide a new password, and it's all not rocket science. So actually, Sebastian, I think, built this in. I don't know. I think it was like a day, like the first prototype. But for us, this was really a security thing. We had to go through security audits. There are passwords involved of a production system potentially, and this is super important. So we could not rush this, and and really, it pains me a lot that we couldn't ship this. But basically, we can't also be, for example, all the people who use Steampunk or the cloud systems, right, and can use it right now. Should we say like, well, we will delay the extension, and then they also can't use it, but they don't need the password? That would also not be fair to them. So we decided, no, we will go with them. Without the SSO and with only SSO, sorry. And at least the others can already use it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the other part in that area basically is about how to get a system configured in the first place. And it's also one of the places where we want to improve in a future version. Because currently what you need to do up front is to have an entry already configured in your sublogon. And then you can import that into your VS Code JSON file where we store our destinations. And currently you can only do this import in the UI like that. But of course, if you know how to do it, there's also a command for it to open the destination file on disk. And you'll figure out the syntax. So this is also not so hard. I'd expect also some guides to pop up soon where people generate their destinations via AI automatically. And I think that's also a first. So I think people wished for that for years, that we are able to change the properties of an Eclipse project and change the user, change the system and the application server and all that. But the situation there is much more complicated, and we took the decision in VS Code now to do it differently and really make sure that everything we put underneath is purely for caching. And now we can really do this, like change the properties of a destination and just reuse it. So everyone who was missing that feature, I hope they'll be glad that it's in now in VS Code.
All right.
And definitely check out the destination JSON. We also had some interesting feedback also from internal people who, because basically all your systems are just like in sublogin in one file, and you can also share this one with other people. There are some user-specific stuff which you can quickly replace, but that's also people were like, oh, great, we can have this basically, especially if you have larger teams who maybe all work on one system configuration. You could even have your own basically template for those. So people can, if they join your team, they can get set up quickly, these kind of things. And you can, as it's just a file on disk, you can really do maybe interesting stuff with it. So we had definitely some interesting feedback regarding that one. So that's also definitely new. It's a little bit under the hood, and this is all this kind of core technology. That's also where it's like, how do we do destination management? Needed to be figured out, But maybe along those lines, Sebastian, so about the question, like, is there the sub GUI installation required? Can I do this without? Can I run VS Code without sub GUI, or is it required? Maybe you can answer that one quickly.
It's not required per se, but if you have sub GUI, it makes it much easier to get started, because then you can just import the destination to VS Code. But at runtime, it's not needed.
All right, guys. So that was really great session. Lots of information. Um, what comes next? What can we expect? A couple months from now, end of the year, next year. What's on the horizon? What's top of mind for you guys?
Maybe I can do the product. Maybe Sebastian, you can even talk a little bit about the technology. I don't know. And maybe also Christopher, you on the file format front. So maybe cover it a little bit like this. So obviously, I think the big pictures for us is really you will see us spend way less time on Eclipse for sure. The focus will now be because we made a promise. We put this out. We put this out as an early release. We know this. Like, and also thanks everybody who's trusting us now to make sure that the roadmap is going. We are running around along the roadmap smoothly. So that really means a lot of us, and that we also know that we live on borrowed trust. You trust us now, and we will work hard to earn your trust that we deliver. So that's why obviously next thing is the next release. We touched on this, which has the RFC with password, super important for people also running local systems. Then really a lot of the core development object types that are currently missing are in. Report programs are in, so super important. And then also that's the first thing. And then obviously, and then the major the priority of work will go into object type support. So it's really that we can get all the object types in, which will be in the end we need 80 plus. We like I said we are at 12 plus. We need 80 plus. So that's a huge chunk of work. But that's really important. So that at least when you're doing object editing and you can stay in VS Code. Alongside, you will have core tools, like transport organizer, feed reader for dumps, these kind of things. That's, like I said, is already in works. So that's that basically. That's more the VS Code side. And then now when we look at agent support, I think we touched on this too. Like just let me summarize. So we need to. We focused basically. The first release is focused on the idea that the agent also brings some read and write tools, like Copilot. It has read and write tools. It can read and write, so that's why it works. Now we clearly see that people want read and write, like they want to use ABAP, they want to use the MCP server in more environments where there are less tools, where you really have to bring all the tools. The agent usually brings no tools. And so we have to complement that set of tools. So like I said, like read, write, search for sure. These are the most obvious ones. And that's really something which we want to focus on, getting that round of that MCP server. Things also like short dumps, for example, it's also already, we have it already internally, these kind of things. It's like short dump tool, these kind of things. But that's basically the bigger picture. So really object type support, and then really much better agent support. And that way also you will then, you touched on CLIs, that will basically then also enable you to use our MCP server together with CLIs like properly. Currently, you will still need a community server for that one.
Okay.
So that's basically the high level picture.
Christopher, Sebastian, last words?
Yeah, I think maybe just from the delivery aspect, so like Thomas already mentioned, need to figure out how we can do the release cycles in a way that we can innovate with each iteration. Like I explained in the initial part of the architecture, that we are basically building upon our core layer. So the main innovation will probably happen there, but still there will some aspects will only require the VS Code part. And so for sure, the goal is to be able to react quickly also and not be limited to these quarterly releases.
Okay, excellent. Well, like I said, guys, from what I was checking this project out early a few months ago, and a lot of things weren't there yet. So I stepped back and came back to it a little bit later. And each time I did, I was more surprised each time with the new features built into it. And then last week, obviously, I checked it out and got a really good experience with it. So I'm real happy with what you guys have done. I think we have a great story, and I'm looking forward to what it looks like later on in the year and seeing what our community ends up building with all these great tools. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your effort here. The community does as well. And yeah, thanks for joining us here today. And maybe we can do this again later in the year for like an update um, on all this good stuff, and we'll do another one at the end of the year. How's that sound? All right. All right.
Yeah, sounds
But for
good.
now, thanks again, guys. Thank you to the community, and we'll check you out on the next time. Okay.
All right.
Bye
Thank you.
for
Thanks for
now.
Thanks
having
for
us.
hosting us. Thanks for having us. Yeah.